Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Boston Celtics are making a flurry of moves right before the draft. Is it the wisest decision? One of those trades drops Kristaps Porzingis down in Atlanta, and the Hawks are thrilled. And a lot of people are calling for a Commanders backslide, but they're actually poised for a deep playoff run.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Boston Celtics on Tuesday evening look a whole lot different than they did on Monday evening. Here to talk about that with me is John Corrales, the host over at Locked On Celtics. And John, let's go move by move. Let's start off with Jrue Holiday. The Celtics move him to the Portland Trail Blazers. Back to Boston goes Anthony Simons and 2 second-round picks. Boston gets the picks in this deal. Felt inevitable that Boston was going to move some of their stars. How shocking of a move was this to you?
I knew that Holiday was going to be the first guy to go. It was just obvious from the beginning, and the shock was the team. I didn't think that Portland was going to want him. I was looking at this offseason, and I thought targeting an expiring contract makes perfect sense because that's if you want to turn around and flip him. There's always the potential that somebody's going to be willing to do that. And if you keep him and you decide, we're just going to let him walk, that leads to savings next year. So I was always looking at potential expiring contracts. I just didn't really consider Portland because of Holiday's age and contract. And I just thought it wasn't going to fit what they wanted to do. But to be fair, he's a great locker room guy. He is a culture setter, 2-time champion, understands the business, understands winning, understands the important little things, the way you get yourself where you need to be to win. So it's not a shock to me that a team values that. So I think, solid. It's a solid move for Boston because it allows them a lot of flexibility.
And Jrue Holiday was first. Kristaps Porzingis was number 2. Porzingis going to the Atlanta Hawks along with a second-round pick, and back to Boston, George Niang, and a second-round pick to them. Brooklyn is involved in the 3-team variety. This was a 3-team deal. Porzingis, John, also felt like someone that was poised to be moved at some point. Was this more or less of a shock than the Jrue trade? Because there were pathways to potentially keeping him. Boston saves a lot of money here with these two moves.
More shocking for sure, because I thought that he would be the guy that you could keep for at least the first few months of the season, see how Jason Tatum's recovery is going. Then, maybe you can figure out a way to maneuver a contending quote unquote season out of this upcoming year before the real teardown had to happen. But the reality is also an expiring deal. So you look at it from an Atlanta perspective and you say, you give up George Niang and a second-round pick. Of course, who cares how hurt Porzingis is? The worst case scenario is he gives you what George Niang was going to give you at no risk. So moving him in this manner makes perfect sense from everybody's perspective. The Celtics, I thought it was a brilliant move using Brooklyn's cap space the way they did as almost, I called it a money laundering kind of move. Through, you use that space, Porzingis comes out clean on the other side. The Celtics end up saving $22 million. Now they're under the second apron. They're less than $5 million away from the first apron. You've really got some financial flexibility. And that's where the win really happens here. Because the Celtics, you're moving on from 2 guys that help you win a championship. But second apron is what it is. And now you're under it, and you get to do things like aggregate players in a trade. You've got guys in Simons and Niang that maybe they never play a minute for you. Maybe they played the season, you let them walk, but you have everything in between, and you can aggregate those guys, get somewhere in the mid $30 million range. If one of those kind of pretty good players who makes a decent amount of money is available, you can make that deal and still be under the second apron. So the flexibility, the maneuvering, the way Brad Stevens is making the best of a bad situation, that's where this becomes the real victory for Boston. They're not as good, but they've now given themselves the opportunity to minimize that damage and maybe hold on to more pieces than we thought they might.
You mentioned some of the flexibility they have, and now all eyes, John, turn to Jaylen Brown. It's reportedly a lot of interest in Jaylen Brown, and rightfully so. He's Jaylen Brown. Is there a realistic possibility to you that Jaylen does get moved here, or do you think that he's going to stay in Boston for the long term?
Look, I can't pretend to know what Brad Stevens is going to do next. No one does, but I don't see the need to trade Jaylen Brown. I'm sure teams are going to be aggressive, and when teams are aggressive, then I'm sure Brad Stevens is going to listen, because Brad, if nothing else, understands that this is a cold business, and the new CBA and that second apron and all of that stuff makes it a much colder business. So you can't sit there and say, hey, we're going to dismiss every offer out of hand. But I don't think there's an offer right now that could entice the Celtics to move on from Jaylen Brown. You still have the potential for Jason Tatum to come back at some point towards the end of the season. It's not out of the question that he's available for a playoff run. So you still have Jaylen, who can carry the team to a playoff spot. Derek White, you were able to still keep Sam Hauser. Who knows what the subsequent moves are going to be? Who knows what they're going to do with the Simons Niang combination, if that gets flipped into another player. There is room here for the Celtics to make another push. However realistic, they won't be the favorite, but they could be a mid-tier playoff team that gets Jason Tatum back, and all of a sudden teams are going to be like, oh no, we have to face the Celtics with a healthy Tatum, motivated to, knowing this is their last run. Who knows? Lightning in a bottle. Pacers made their run. Maybe the Celtics can be that version next playoffs.
You can stay up to date all year on the Boston Celtics by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Celtics on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. You're Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, the Hawks are loving the addition of Porzingis. Before we get to that, the NCAA tournament might be expanding soon. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth instead of juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. March Madness might be getting just a little more madness. According to ESPN, the NCAA is nearing a decision on expanding both the men's and women's basketball tournaments to as many as 76 teams starting in 2025-2026. That will mark the largest expansion since 1985, and depending who you ask, either a win for opportunity or a threat to the magic of the current format. The plan still needs sign-off from media partners, but if it moves forward, one thing is clear. We may need to start calling the first four something a little more crowded. Over on the diamond, the Astros got into a slugfest with the Phillies.
The Astros went from almost being no-hit by the Phillies and Ranger Suarez to winning this game by a home run by Cooper Hummel. My name is Eric Heisman with the Locked On Astros podcast. I'm in Spokane, Washington right now, and I couldn't stop watching this game. I was hooked on to this game. I was locked on to this game, and it had a little bit of everything, a little bit of pitching. Framber Valdez, 7 shutout innings. You had the Astros almost being no-hit, 6 no-hit innings, and then you had Cooper Hummel in the 8th inning getting the clutch home run, and then you had Josh Hader getting the save. So we'll go and talk about this on tonight's Locked On Astros podcast.
And the Reds took the Yankees to extra innings.
Epic walk-off tonight at Great American Ballpark over the New York Yankees. Hey everybody, it's Tim Daniel from the Reds Postcast, part of Locked On Reds. What an unbelievable night at Great American Ballpark. Chase Burns' Major League debut strikes out everybody. The Reds are down 3-0. They battle back to make it interesting in the 7th inning. They pull it off despite Terry Francona's best efforts in decision-making. The Reds get the big win. win to win another series against the Yankees here at home. I'll be here in just a few minutes live on the Reds Postcast. Talk to you all then.
The Atlanta Hawks snatched up Kristaps Porzingis in a 3-team trade with the Boston Celtics and Brooklyn Nets. Locked On Hawks host Brad Rowland shared his excitement over the deal.
My overall analysis of that trade right now is that I like it quite a bit for the Hawks. It's not without risk, as I discovered in that podcast and discussed in that podcast. It's one of those things where like he has some injury history on those things, but the player, the situation, the contract, it all kind of makes sense for Atlanta. One thing here at the top of the show about that is that it still has not been announced at this point in time, late into the night on Tuesday into Wednesday. Not official, not announced, not stamped by the team, but it's been confirmed multiple times by multiple people. So I will just assume that's going to be getting done in the coming hours and days. Also, when I recorded that show earlier today, we did not know which second round pick was going to be coming to Atlanta. Since then, Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype reported that the Hawks will be getting the less favorable part of a 2026 second round pick from the Boston Celtics. The details there are still kind of fuzzy. It's kind of one of those like swapped picks, but needless to say, not a super exciting second round pick. So kind of more of a throw in there. I said on the show earlier tonight that my projection for that pick, whichever one was going to be, was pretty low. I know Hawks fans were hoping it was going to be one of those picks from in this year's draft, which are 32 and 36. Not as much. That could still be a decent pick, but still just more of a throw-in. But alas, the analysis still holds up. I still like the deal. And no matter what that pick happens to be, I will be high on the transaction, at least for right now. With that said, I will let that podcast stand on its own, and I encourage you to listen to it if you happen to miss that one. But from this point forward, we'll kind of be diving into the draft. It is the big day. We've been covering the draft for a couple of months now, pretty consecutively. Lots of guests, lots of analysis. Obviously, there were some changes to what's going on, adding Porzingis, but still, for me, big picture, best player available is my kind of mindset. It's also what Auntie Soleil said on Monday. And if you believe that, then it doesn't change that much. It just has the Hawks just have one less pick to work with than they had a few hours ago. So I'll discuss the 13th pick, which is the pick the Hawks have. But again, if you have time during the day today, I recorded something like 25 or 30 draft-focused episodes over the last 2.5 months. So there's plenty of content about all these prospects. My thoughts, my guest thoughts, they're all there for you. So if you have some time digging into that stuff, very relevant conversations up and down the podcast archive. But to set the table a little bit before I get into the prospects, I think it's still being a little bit undervalued right now. How much uncertainty and I would say optionality, to use the Auntie Soleil term, the Hawks still have even after the Porzingis trade. So this is going to be a point I was going to make no matter what tonight. It's a little bit different now post-trade, but it's still true to me. And forgive me if you're an everyday listener. Number one, I appreciate you. But number two, I've probably said some of this stuff before. But the uncertainty really does kind of stem from a combination of a lot of things. Number one, you have the front office overhaul. This is a different group without a track record that's been like established to kind of make reads off of. You got a young core that is really intriguing and talented that also makes sense together as a unit. There's the absence of like super obvious like positional needs. Like right now, the bench is very thin, but like they have a clear top six that makes sense together with the last year's starting five and now Porzingis being added to that. Also, there's like a relative lack of consensus in this draft, which kind of adds to the optionality and the intrigue and the uncertainty of what's going on here. And then the last thing is the Hawks still have the trade exception, which is $25 million or so they can use. And they have the mid-level exception they can use if they want to. And they have Karis LeVert's bird rights. They have ways to add to their roster, both in the draft and out of the draft. So all of that, throw it in a stew, throw it in a recipe, and there's still like lots of uncertainty and optionality here. I would say more so than in most drafts. Like the Hawks can still go a lot of different directions, even if it seems like it's more straight ahead now. And look, they might just go in and make one pick and that'll be it on Wednesday. Very possible, but they still could have some different paths to be taken on Wednesday. So for instance, they could still trade up. Now, some of the juice has been taken out of that to some degree because a lot of the popular notions about the Hawks trading up had to do with centers, and in particular, Common Malawatch was a popular target and discussion point for Hawks fans, and just some of the reporting that was out there as well. That is not impossible still now. I think it's probably less likely than it was before, but if they love a guy, it's possible that they want to go get that guy. Like that's definitely conceivable to me. I also believe that trading down is also quite possible at this point, maybe even more so than it was a few hours ago. Now, this is probably a scenario that I've discussed the least overall because it's not sexy. Fans generally don't like trading down. Not everybody, but like as a general consensus.
Stay up to date all year on the Atlanta Hawks by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Hawks on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Commanders are ready to make a deeper playoff run. There are a lot of folks out there writing off the Washington Commanders in Jaden Daniels' second season. Locked On NFL host Tony Wiggins and Julian Council discuss why the Commanders are actually ready to make more noise in the postseason.
So this ain't buy or sell. What this is Julian, are you convinced? Are you convinced now that Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders are here to stay, or was last year just look at that nice little team, and can they keep doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going away as far as like going back to being one of the worst run franchises in the NFL and searching for a quarterback. I do think they obviously have their guy now in Jaden Daniels. And Dan Quinn did a great job when he was in Atlanta. I know things not end well there after blowing a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. Never forget that happened to those Falcons, and it's just downhill from there. But I think he's a good head coach. And clearly you saw in Dallas when he was their DC, just the culture around that defense and how well they played. He's carried that over to Washington, and with the new ownership with Josh Harris and bringing in Adam Peters as general manager, drafting Jaden Daniels, and then we got RFK coming back. Like, the vibes are immaculate right now in DC. So I feel it, but like, I don't know, because last year, like, that was a good football team, but that wasn't a football team that necessarily you felt like was the second best team in the NFC playing for a chance to go to the Super Bowl when we saw just how far behind they were from Philadelphia. Now, this is a division in the NFC East where you have to go all the way back to 03-04 to find back-to-back winning champions. So in all likelihood, the Eagles are not going to win the NFC East again, just based off the last 20 years of history, which means it's either going to be Dallas or Washington. And if Washington does that, then they're going to have a pretty good chance to get back to where they were last year. But where's the pass rush? Don't have any edge rushers right now. Bringing in Debo's great. I love that. Getting Larry Tunsil's great. I love that. But like, defensively, that was their Achilles heel. And will they be good enough getting after the passer in order to take that next level and truly be one of those upper echelon teams and a true Super Bowl contender this upcoming season?
Welcome to the show, Chase Burns, where you strike out the first 6 batters you face and still walk away with the loss. The Reds rookie pitcher opened his MLB debut on Tuesday night with pure electricity, becoming just the 3rd pitcher since 1961 to record his first 6 outs via strikeout. The Yankees eventually adjusted, but Burns still finished with 8 punch-outs in triple-digit heat on the radar gun. Not a win in the box score, of course, but definitely a debut that turned heads in Cincinnati. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we are here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up, we get you set for the 2025 NBA draft, so at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.